My moment of impact was waking up in New York City the morning of September 11th, 2001. It was the first time in 18 years since college that I was not a founder or a CEO of a company. It was a beautiful sunny day. I didn't know what to do with myself. I walked to the gym, and then I saw on the TVs, one World Trade Center tower was burning. And as I watched that, the other one got hit and exploded. I didn't realize at the time that it made me think differently, but how could it not? About how precious life is, how sacred our moments are, how you spend your time, what you're going to remember. That was my moment of impact.
Today's impactful guest is Robert Levitan.
Hey!
Robert is the co-chair of the Ethical Tech Project, which is both a think and do tank. The focus of the Ethical Tech Project is to encourage the ethical and responsible use of AI as techno-optimists. And it offers research, convenings, programs and fellowships, plus partnerships with organizations where the Ethical Tech Project team will go in and partner and help you deploy AI responsibly, build ethical frameworks, implement safeguards, and develop governance structures. Important, but that's not all you should know about Robert. He has founded 6 businesses as an entrepreneur, remarkable in and of itself. But when you look under the hood at his entrepreneurial track record, you realize he founded them always ahead of the technology adoption curve, which is a pretty unmatched record. And we're going to talk about that today, including co-founding iVillage in 1995, which had a very successful IPO, Pando Networks in 2004, which had a successful sale to Microsoft. He was ahead of the curve on affiliation-based online communities, digital currency, massive file sharing a la BitTorrent, geomapping, neighborhood-level mapping, genetic testing, counseling, and more. And right now, he's where we need him as a global society facing the biggest challenge of our time, along with climate change, which is how do we use AI ethically and responsibly? Coming to us today from Bethesda, Maryland, Robert, it's my pleasure and honor to welcome you to the pod today.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Excellent. Okay, audience, you have a chance to hear from one of the OG founders of Silicon Alley, New York tech scene from the 1990s, who was agile enough to work with his co-founders and his teams to execute on each disruptive technology as it was emerging and nascent. What I encourage you to be attuned to in this episode is now how Robert steps into the role of internet historian, public policy advisor, as well as insanely successful entrepreneur, and isolates the critical lessons learned from the past that we as a global society need to apply today in designing responsible AI use. I can't think of anyone better suited for the job, so let's get into it. Without further ado, Robert, what is your moment of impact?
My moment of impact was waking up in New York City the morning of September 11th, 2001. It was the first time in 18 years since college that I was not a founder or a CEO of a company. It was a beautiful sunny day. I didn't know what to do with myself. I walked to the gym, thought I might work out and take a steam. And then I saw on the TVs, one World Trade Center tower was burning. And as I watched that, the other one got hit with an airplane and exploded. That was my moment of impact.
That is a monumental moment of impact, and it's also one anyone who was alive at the time remembers exactly what they were doing. You're a native New Yorker. There you are in New York when this is happening. What was your experience like that morning?
Well, profound sadness, profound disappointment in humanity that we're capable of doing this. You know, what I will say is the weeks and months after September 11th in New York, you saw the response, the humanity response, the volunteers rushing to help. I volunteered down at this site. You saw the best of humanity, as a response to the worst of humanity. So I didn't realize at the time that it made me think differently about, but how could it not, about how precious life is, how sacred our moments are, how you spend your time, what you're going to remember.
That is such a poignant moment, and I really appreciate you sharing that with us. It really just personalizes the theme that you were talking about, that the best of New York showed up when this disaster happened, the incredible, courageous nature of the first responders and everyone, restaurant workers. I mean, everyone was doing their part. Even I was in a little suburban town in Illinois outside of Chicago, and you would walk down the street those first couple of days and everyone would make eye contact with you. There was a sense of shared humanity. People were not doing the normal looking at their feet and whizzing by. There was just this sense that we are all Americans and we need to identify at our unity, not our divisiveness. So we do want to spend a lot of time talking about what you're doing now with AI, but you have kind of an irresistible founder history, and I feel like people would be like, oh, I wish you would have asked about that. So we're going to have to move through it at a pretty fast clip, given how much you've innovated, but I do want to go there. So let's do a career progression of some of your founder greater hits. And we can do like a 1-2 punch. I'll tee them up, and then maybe you can go to maybe the origin story or the takeaway. You're really great at applying the takeaways to our modern era. So I think we need to start with iVillage 1995. You co-founded it with Candace Carpenter, who's the former president of Time Life Video, and Nancy Evans, who's the ex-president and publisher at Doubleday. What was the origin story of founding iVillage?
Well, the origin story was really simple. Someone introduced me to Candace. I met her in Central Park. We're walking around. It was January 25th, 1995. And she said to me, it was a Wednesday. What are you doing Friday? I said, I could be available. Literally, this is true. And she goes, great. I just got hired by this company AOL to help them figure out their business model. Can you come down to Vienna, Virginia and sit in a meeting? Yes, it was Vienna, Virginia, not Dulles yet. I was like, sure, but I've never been online. True story. She said, that's okay, come anyway. Well, what do you think I did the next day? I mean, not that next day. That afternoon, I called two friends, a couple of guys who went to Duke, Paul Dewey, Peter Stevenson. And yes, I called Paul and Peter. I said, guys, you're online, right? What's it like? Can I come over? Can I see what it is? So I went and I saw it. And then I went to the meeting the next day. And what were we doing? We were meeting at AOL with the people who were designing the very first shopping screens on AOL. Wow. Like one of the first e-commerce applications online. Why? They were designing that because AOL used to pay by the minute. It was a time-metered service, and they wanted to find other revenue sources. Lo and behold, I'm there. I'm talking. I'm giving my opinion. Well, if you click here, it should go there. And no, I think it would be better if it did this. I didn't know any better. At the end of the meeting, Candace Carpenter says to me, okay, listen, that was great. I want to hire you. You and I are going to consult, and we work for Ted Leonsis at AOL. We're going to help him figure out the business model. And I'm going away for a week, so you're in charge. I've been online one day. I've been in one meeting, and I got hired to consult. Now, what's the lesson there? Funny enough, it feels like the same time in AI. You just jump in. You can learn it. You can become an expert. Nobody really understands it yet. There's going to be a lot of experimentation. But anyway, that was a great, great, great experience. And after 6 months of consulting at AOL, well, we figured it out. We have to start our own company. We have to start a company. We called it iVillage. What's it going to do? We're going to create online communities. Why? How did we have that insight? great story. We looked at all the content on AOL, and AOL measured every piece of content, how many times people visited a specific piece of content, and how much time they spent with that content. And what we saw was a straight line, XY curve, straight up. At the very bottom was People Magazine and ABC News. At the very top, all the people talking to each other.
Yeah.
The Motley Fool talking about finance. Better Health talking about health, cancer. Gay and Lesbian Forum, people talking to each other. So what we saw was the highest number of visits per month and the highest minutes per visit was all about community. People were logging on and talking to each other. It wasn't about consuming television news or magazines or newspapers. It was about connecting with other people. So Candace turned to Ted and said, we want to start a media company in New York. We want you to give us $1 million. And we're going to build an online community around women, around parenting, career, health information for women. And Ted said, Candace, I was in my mid or early 30s. Candace was a decade older. Candace and Nancy, who joined us, also around Candace's age. Ted said to Candace, I think you're too old, but I'll do it. Let's see what you can do. Right?
And the rest is
person's
history.
medium. And it was, anyway, long story short, we created iVillage. We built the largest online destination for women.
Yep.
And that was great. And we had an IPO. Well, that was great. On the first day, it was priced at $12 a share. It went to $100. It was worth over $1 billion. We were doing $20 million a year in revenue. I mean, it's crazy. Don't worry. 6 months later, after the lockup, it was, 15% of that price. So it was a roller coaster.
Right.
But I think on the one hand, we were really successful. We did all kinds of innovative things. We connected people. We were the largest online site for women. I was very proud. We built interactive health applications, and I was responsible for generating revenue, and I was able, no one had websites. I would go to companies. I would say, we'll build you a website so that they can advertise. So I had to build a website for them so they could advertise. We did all this stuff. Yes, that later became known as native advertising or content marketing. But what was the thing that went wrong? What was the real big lesson now I see at iVillage I didn't see then? And the answer is called unintended consequences. That we lived then in a naive state that if everybody connected on the internet, everybody shared information, nothing but good could happen. The truth would rise to the top. We'd all be helping each other. We could connect the world. Kumbaya. We didn't have it in our brains that while we looked at this technology as a way to connect and help people, other people would look at a connected world and say, this is a place I can do something else. If I've got bad intent, well, I can spread misinformation, disinformation. I can spread hatred. I can find people to prey on. I mean, this was online community hardcore before social media, right? This was early online communities. They were built on things called chat rooms and message boards.
Right.
Where people are really communicating with each other, right? So, and it was before Section 230 went in 1996, which is, of course, is a famous tech, law that tried to protect people like iVillage because we couldn't keep up with everything people were posting. How could we be responsible for what they were posting? Mm-hmm. But it's a classic example, unintended consequences. Again, Section 230 gave protection to online publishers of content when users put their content there. But that was when online media companies were small, needed the help, but it's the fish that ate the whale. They then became the big media companies, and all of a sudden, they also now have tools. All of a sudden, they have tools that we can monitor what's happening, but then we didn't. But the bottom line is Section 230 went awry. It became enshrined as you can say anything you want online, and the platform can't take you down unless they say it's violating our rules, but they make up their own rules. we don't do that with TV broadcasters. We don't do it with magazines or newspapers, right? We hold them accountable for both. I get it. The internet's different. You post information online. You can't have people editing it. I get that. But we have to have some rules. You can't post, hate speech. It can't be allowed. But anyway, so that was the big lesson. iVillage, tremendous success for me, certainly propelled my career. But looking back, I think I was naive. I didn't understand people would use a platform like the internet and online communities as a place to cause real damage.
There's always the seeds of the demise in the success, and the opportunity for it to be used for harm is something that's really consequential right now, given the power of AI. In fact, you were actually named Advertising Age's 20 Digital Media Master for coming up with the innovation of the native advertising. And that was a whole revolution of giving people tools to connect with each other. If you were in a rural town and you were thinking about coming out, and you didn't know anyone else that was out, you could go on an online message board and you would see there are all these people encouraging you. So it was just a beautiful affiliation-based thing. So you go on, you do a crypto business called Flues. You found Pando Networks, which is really embraced by game developers because of the massive data speeds. That's acquired by Microsoft in 2013. You find Live XYZ in 2014, right out of Pando Networks, which was like a live map of cities showing businesses on every block at different times of days. And then let's go to April 2020, Prone to Help for a minute.
Yeah. Can I just give very quick, I promise?
Yes.
Very
Over
short.
to you.
A quick. Digital currency, Flues.com, 1999. Great idea. We're going to allow people to have a stored value platform 12 years before Bitcoin. This is great. Long story short, a very important lesson again, 0 to 30 million in revenue in 18 months, hundreds of thousands of customers. This is great. I send you $100 of Flues. You have an online currency. You go shopping. You pay with Flues. We're the first form of alternative payment at checkout. Great. Okay. Long story short, we get a call from the FBI. Because this is the second big lesson of my technology naivete going wrong. We got a call from the FBI. Well, we found out, they say, that some Russian criminal gangs have been stealing credit card bills in the mail, the U.S. mail, shipping them to Russia, and they're using Flues.com and your platform to launder the money. Okay. Well, in those days, your credit card statement had your whole number and everything. So they were using our platform to convert these credit cards into Flues.com currency, and then they were selling, okay, you want $100 of his currency, you can go shopping online, you buy it for $80. Okay, so anyway, long story short, shuts us down. Chase Bank finds our fraud rate goes up, they stop processing our transactions, whatever. Now, all of a sudden, right, we got a high-profile bankruptcy. This is the bankruptcy I talked about. It happened right before September 11th. September 10th was my last day. Closed the business, met with the bankruptcy attorney. I'm free.
Wow.
So guess what? We lost $52 million of venture capital money. We had 65 people working there who were out of a job. We had 300,000 customers who had money in their Flues.com online accounts. They were out of their money. But what happened after September 11th? To tie this back in, and I know I'm going, Katie, but guess what? The bankruptcy kind of hearing that was supposed to happen in downtown New York, it got postponed because the courtroom was in downtown New York and that whole area was closed off. When it did happen, 3 months or so, 2-3 months after, not one single creditor showed up. And that was the world telling me something. We had like 50 or 100 merchants that we owed money to. We had 300,000 individuals that were owed money. and not one creditor showed up. And that was the world saying, hey, look at this perspective. September 11th just happened. What happened with that business? That was just money. But so that's one lesson, a little perspective. The other lesson, of course, is Russian gangs, organized crime, impacting us here. Again, the network. We've got an internet. It's connected, and bad actors are there. Okay. So, big lesson. Now, let's get to good technology, good things. You said I started during the pandemic. You're going to the pandemic. Pandemic happens, and I found a way to use the internet to do some real good. Okay? So that story is, I think, did you mention Prone to Help? You actually mentioned the organization, or you were just leading up to it?
Leading up to it. So why don't you take it away with Prone to Help?
Okay. So COVID comes. It's the spring of 2020. I have a twin brother. He's an emergency room doctor. He actually trained at Bellevue. He went on to become an expert in airway management, now lives up in New Hampshire. Everybody's leaving New York. I went with my wife, 2 young kids, our brand new dog, and we went north up into the Catskills. My twin brother comes from New Hampshire down to volunteer. He goes and volunteers at Bellevue Hospital to treat COVID patients. He's in double suits, the whole thing. Okay, why is this important? How does it relate to technology in my journey? He discovers, along with other emergency room doctors in New York, and they don't get enough credit, all these emergency room doctors in New York treated this thing. Nobody knew what this was. And why is it so weird that people who are completely coherent are showing like blood oxygen levels like they're on the top of Mount Everest? We better put them on a respirator. Well, they discovered, 1, they didn't have enough respirators. 2, maybe they shouldn't put them on a respirator. What could they do? They discovered that when you prone a patient, you lie them on your stomach, it enables the lungs to get more air and that people could recover without being put on a respirator. The only problem is lying on your stomach's really hard, especially if you're pregnant or you're obese. It's really hard. So my twin brother had this idea, we need like a cushion, almost like a mattress, like a massage mattress, a big hole for the tummy, and we can treat patients. Okay, so he goes to me and my older brother and says, can you guys buy some of these massage mattresses and send them to Bellevue? Yes, we do it. It works. People love it. It's saving lives. So he says to us, why don't we start a company? And why don't we raise money and we'll buy proning cushions and we'll send them to hospitals and they can treat patients. That's what we did. Now, how is that possible? Well, things were suspended in terms of procurement. You could buy something, bring it in, treat a patient. It's not like, normal. And so we built a website, wonderful website, and Prone to Help, the number 2, Prone to Help. And we started just saying to doctors, if you're a doctor or a nurse or a hospital administrator, you need these, just come to our site. So we ended up distributing almost 1,500 of these cushions to like 400 different hospitals. But on the other side, we had the website, and people could come and make donations. And lo and behold, I forget how much we raised, $40,000, $50,000, $60,000. So it was all free. We provided free equipment to treat COVID patients that helped save lives. And we educated people all around the world how to treat it. We had people from Africa, people from Europe, people from Asia asking us, can you send some? The answer is no, we can't. But here, you can do it yourself. Here's what this is. And in fact, we had taken what was a massage mattress for pregnant women, and my twin brother ended up making a few changes. We then manufactured specific proning cushions. And FedEx gave us this preferential rate to ship it. So I went to FedEx. They said, we'll ship it from one East Coast factory, one West Coast factory, and we'll ship them. So there was an example, Prone to Help. Wow, did that feel good? We were using the power of the internet to create awareness. This was available, make it available to doctors and nurses and administrators, make it available for consumers to contribute, make it available to educate the world. And that just felt great. So that was an example of using tech for good. I think, we can talk about that. The other one you mentioned was the BitTorrent example, which I'll dive into. But
yeah, that's such a powerful example because I remember just watching the Governor Cuomo updates, and the big news was there weren't enough ventilators, there weren't enough respirators, and you and your brothers came together and made the solution, and then married the Kickstarter element of it, because we were all like, we will do anything to try to ease this suffering. Like, people were primed to donate. They just, it always felt so many steps removed. So that is such a beautiful example. Okay, take us to Pando Networks.
So Pando Networks is another example of, and actually it's so relevant to today, it's an example of taking a technology, BitTorrent, which at the time was considered a rogue, illegal technology. Some of us remember BitTorrent, allows you to download really large files from multiple computers, other people that have the file, and it was used basically for piracy, for films and music and stuff like that, and people all over the world were doing that. And we had this idea of creating what we call kind of a managed, secure, kind of cloud delivery network using BitTorrent protocol instead of traditional servers. And we made it work. Now, when I say we made it work, at first we gave it away to consumers. It was free. We couldn't monetize it. I got the pressure from the VCs. Then I went to business customers, and I went to TV companies like NBC, but they were conflicted still in, 2010, 2011. They were conflicted. How do we really want to deliver a lot of video online? And we've got this thing, Hulu. We'll just let them do that. We're conflicted. But then I discovered video game companies. So Korean video game companies, the first one was Nexon. Unbelievable. I remember you talk about moments, from NBC Studio Hollywood, and outside of LA to downtown LA to the Korean game company. It was like two different worlds, right? The Korean game company was like, wait a sec, you can deliver our free-to-play, really large game files really quickly, really inexpensively, and the more people that download them, then the more people that play, then the more money we make. Sounds great. So long story short, we ended up delivering like 200 million video game downloads a year.
Wow.
And I then approached Microsoft Xbox as a customer. I said, why don't you guys deliver your video games this way? Now you're doing a combination of physical games and downloads, and it doesn't work for you when you deliver a new game, and our technology will make it infinitely scalable and faster and less expensive. Ended up selling the company to Microsoft. Xbox wasn't going to be a customer and rely on a 16-person team in New York. But what's the lesson? How did we do this? We didn't just create using BitTorrent. We also went and we formed a coalition, an industry coalition. We created a coalition. We went to Verizon. We went to Comcast. We went to AT&T. We said, you guys hate BitTorrent. Prime time, 8 p.m., your networks are flooded with people downloading content using BitTorrent, and it's costing you a lot of money. There's data coming in and out from all over the world. Someone in Tokyo is connecting to someone in New York, and you've got to buy a lot of equipment. So it's OpEx, it's CapEx. It's really bad. You know what we can do? We, working with you, can take this BitTorrent thing, and if somebody's in New York City and they're on Verizon broadband, we called it at the time, and they're on the Upper East Side and somebody else is on the Upper East Side and both of them have the file, we can do it right there inside your network. This will create faster downloads, less operational expense for you, less CapEx. You can buy fewer, less hardware to deal with this. Anyway, we created a group called P4P. So instead of P2P, peer-to-peer, it was P4P. And Laird Popkin, who was this CTO of Pando at the time, is really like innovator of this. Long story short, it worked. We showed it worked. And not only did it result in great things, so here's a rogue technology that now was able to deliver large media files for consumers much faster, for operators like Verizon and others, less expensive, faster, and for everybody, legal, secure, managed, and for businesses that wanted to get their content out, it was lower cost, faster. So everybody wins. And it turns out it was also great when it was time to sell it to Microsoft, because Microsoft, doing due diligence, said, wait a second, this is BitTorrent, you're using some open source, and then you're building on top of it. And isn't that open source stuff used for piracy and illegal stuff? And we said, well, no, we have a coalition. We're partners. They're not going to block you. And what's funny is, you may remember, you're not old enough to remember, when Microsoft thought they might go into the cable business, and they had MSNBC, but they also talked about investing in broadband networks. And they still had that memory, like, oh, we get it. Those guys really control the pipes. So anyway, Pando Networks, big success, private sale. Now, I would tell you is we sold it. They used it in the Xbox to deliver games. Satya Nadella becomes the CEO of Microsoft. He says, why are there tech platforms for Xbox, another one for Windows, and another one for Office 365? Why don't we have one tech platform? Long story short, our technology is used now to deliver every piece of Microsoft software. But we didn't get paid for that. I have to say, I didn't get paid for that. We didn't get paid for that. But it has an impact. So there you go. Rogue technology gone well. Lessons to today, of course, this is possible. This is possible. You know, if we can agree on standards of how to use technology that is safe and has benefits for everybody, then the market will force out the bad stuff. You know, I mean, there may still be people who use BitTorrent for illegal downloads, but I would argue in part because it's less expensive now to deliver content, and it's faster and less expensive, that there isn't as much need and there's more choices. There isn't as much need to have rogue technology. So I think, you know, we hopefully did our part to help people consume more media, which has unintended consequences online. But anyway, very proud of that.
Yeah, absolutely. That's an amazing contribution. And the fact that it's, the platform of choice across the entire Microsoft enterprise is proof in the pudding. So the through line here is so clearly that you approach opportunities with a growth mindset, a set of curiosity, a willingness to imagine what could be, not just what is. And I think that is probably your secret sauce that has enabled you to take each one of these technologies, either recontextualize it, as in the case of Pando and BitTorrent, recontextualize it for good, or also just imagine what's possible with the iVillage example on through. So I don't want to skip over Identify, but we do have a lot to talk about.
Let's go right to Ethical Tech Project.
Let's go right to Ethical Tech Project.
Yeah.
Okay, so you are the co-chair of the Ethical Tech Project. You recently joined. It's a nonprofit organization dedicated to advancing responsible, transparent, and human-centered innovation in artificial intelligence and emerging technologies. I am handing you the microphone. Tell us, what do we need to be thinking about with the ethical and responsible use of AI right now?
Well, we need to be thinking about these unintended consequences. We're less naive now, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay? I think maybe until now, every technology, there might have been a little fear about the automobile and hurting the horse trade. There may have been a little fear about industrial revolution hurting, workers or not replacing jobs. But in general, during our lifetime, I've seen excitement, cable television, the internet, mobile phones. I mean, everything is like life is getting better and better, right? Technology
Netflix.
What's that?
Netflix.
Right. I mean, life is good. Technology just gets better and better. I think with AI, this is a turning moment. I think people are now realizing, and it took 30 years of the internet, but I think people are realizing, wait a sec. Like, we're now interconnected. So on top of the internet, everyone's connected. On top of us all having a phone connected. Now we're going to have this technology that can do things that maybe only humans could do before. And we know from the internet that there are some people who use that connectivity in a bad way. Oh my God, what might they do with AI? So what we need to be thinking about, we're not going to eliminate all the bad behavior, okay? But we need to be thinking about how we can just bend the curve a little bit to try to ensure that there's going to be more benefits than harm from the deployment of AI. And very quick origin story, I wasn't planning to be the co-chair of the Ethical Tech Project. I just started writing on LinkedIn. I started writing the history examples that you and I are talking about. And they called me up and they said, you want to join and what do you want to do? I said, okay, I'll be the co-chair. And I feel like it's my mission to share lessons learned, to open up people's minds. But there are moments I think it's futile. Will it make any difference? How can we make a difference? I mean, we are living in a world of not just fast technology with consumers adopting every new technology way faster and faster. You can't slow that down. We're in a competitive race with China on this technology. And, we're living in a world where there won't be any regulation. And even if there is regulation, like there was 230 regulation, whatever you institute is going to need to be revisited, right? Okay. So how can you do it? And this is really what I've been trying to do with Ethical Tech Project, is turn us to, we know the lessons learned. We know how to teach kind of how you might think about ethical tech and responsible AI. So we teach this, and we teach this to product managers, engineers, but we also teach it to senior executives at companies. And I think we've come up with a pretty good formula that says, you don't have to be intimidated by this. There's a path to responsible AI. And the other message is, it's good for business. Yeah, it's the right thing to do, but don't do it because it's the right thing to do. Do it because it's a competitive advantage. In a world where people are equally scared, afraid of AI, they're also excited about the possibility. So in this place where there's fear and excitement at the same time, trust and working with companies you trust and being a company that is trusted becomes so critical. And I do think we're seeing that in the market. I mean, you had asked in our prep conversation, talk about examples. I think we've got some really solid early examples of where it makes a difference. If you do the ethical thing, if you do the responsible thing, you're going to build a good business. And if you don't, you're not. And I just think, we're all living it. It's like we're almost in a movie right now. We're in the movie as it's unfolding. But, I'm happy to give these examples. I think everybody will know, what they are, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So, like, as an ex-BCG principal, there's nothing I like hearing better than the words competitive advantage. And I have read all your LinkedIns. I suggest that everyone do the same. They're really valuable. And I think talking about how it's a competitive advantage for business because you're building trust, right? These guardrails and governance,
Right.
they
You know what
sound like
else
the
you're
right
doing?
thing. Yeah,
You're mitigating risk. So on
mitigating
the
risk.
one hand, you're building trust. More people want to work with you. The other thing you're doing is you're mitigating risk. Because guess what's going to happen? It's coming.
Yeah.
I mean, OpenAI is already being sued by the parents of a young
Yeah.
person. But
Let's
anyway,
go
this
there.
is,
Let's compare
yeah,
OpenAI and Anthropic,
right.
and go to the competitive advantage. Two companies asked to do the same thing by the Pentagon, right? They want autonomous weapons, which means no human in the loop, the way they want to use them, and they want mass surveillance. And the Pentagon goes to both Anthropic and OpenAI, and they respond totally differently. Over to you.
Well, so they do respond differently. One of the little subtleties is they both were willing to have the conversation with the Pentagon about using AI for warfare and surveillance. But Anthropic says, we care about safety. We don't want there to be mistakes. And right now, the technology isn't yet kind of safe enough to use for completely autonomous weapons where you're killing people. It could make a mistake. So what's fascinating, the subtlety is the public thinks they said, no, you can't use it for that. They actually didn't say, no, you can't use it. They said, it's not ready yet for that. It's not reliable, which is a real subtle but important, ethical thing. Okay, I get it. Technology is going to be used by the Department of Defense. Someone's going to use it. You can use our technology for it, but we want to make sure that it's safe enough, reliable enough, that it's not going to make a terrible mistake and kill people.
Right,
So,
like some people feel that the Iranian school that was bombed and all those girls were killed was a mistake of autonomous AI. I think we'll never know. But yeah, over to you.
Right. We'll never know. Okay, so what's fascinating, and now we talk about trust. What happened literally that Thursday, they say, sorry, we're going to step back. And OpenAI steps in. It says, we got a deal, Department of Defense. What happens that weekend? Boom. All of a sudden, the downloads of Claude go straight up, and the downloads of ChatGPT, I don't know if they went down, but they tailed off, right? They flattened. So consumers said, all right, I trust them more. They're thinking. Now, of course, their history is they came out of OpenAI. They were the safety team. But you know what they did even before the Pentagon negotiations? That's just a result of something they did earlier, with what every company needs to do. They have an ethical framework that they publish and they talk about. It's called the, Anthropic principles, constitutional principles. And they lay out kind of what they will and won't kind of build their technology for, what they will and won't tolerate. And so they laid that out early, which then leads to these decisions. And I think that's what every company needs to do. Every company needs to think of an ethical framework, think about how they're willing to use the technology, where they're not. And it's maybe dependent on industry. If you're in the healthcare industry, you've already got some ethical frameworks you have to work within, and regulations you have to work within. But that's what they did. In fact, again, something people didn't notice, Anthropic market share for enterprise sales of LLMs was already climbing past OpenAI when this happened, because enterprises want to work with a company they can trust. So Anthropic and OpenAI, obviously, textbook example, trust matters. A couple of quick others, Grok and nudifying images. I mean, Grok does that. They take children faces, they nudify the image, they send it out. Now, I will tell you, that's both unethical and illegal. And in fact, Google Gemini won't do that. ChatGPT won't do that. Claude won't do that. Okay? It won't happen. But he does that. And then he puts it behind a paid wall and says, oh, well, it's a subscription service. That doesn't make it ethical. That doesn't make it legal. That's another fallacy, because we have cable television and they can do things behind. Anyway, that's an example. And frankly, maybe I'm not in the right crowd, but I don't know anybody who uses Grok, and I don't recommend it, right? Because I don't want to trust. So I'm going to give you one more example, which I think is a fascinating one. That's a future that's very kind of relevant. One day I'm watching a clip because I've been told I have to watch it. And it's a news story, about 10 minutes in the UK. It's on Channel 4 in the UK. And there's a woman, and she's the newscaster, and she's saying AI is going to change the world, and it's certainly going to change work. And we're going to talk to people, and we're going to hear from all these people whose jobs may be affected by AI. At the end, she says, well, there you see it. AI is going to have huge impacts, going to affect a lot of jobs. And in fact, I am AI. Boom. You've been watching a news story for 10 minutes, thinking there's a woman who's a newscaster, who's, smart and friendly and articulate, and it's not a person. So to bring it down on an individual level, I want to live in a world where there's a stamp that says this is not a person. Is that too much to ask? Can we all agree?
Yeah, I think
that's a good thing.
We can all agree. I was at South by Southwest London last June, and they showed us a bunch of videos, and then they said which one is all AI, and no one could tell. And it really blew my mind. And I realized, okay, there's some places where the AI isn't ready yet, like autonomous warfare. And then there's other places where human perception, it's already beyond our ability to perceive. I just want to highlight what you said about that constitutional AI that Anthropic has, that hierarchy of values, because you're talking about the need to have the guardrails and the governance, the ethical principles, in order to have this trust, in order to have the competitive advantage. And so they have this hierarchy of values, which is safety first, then ethical principles, like they put in things like the UN Declaration of Human Rights, then thirdly, Anthropic compliance, and forth genuine helpfulness. So I think it is such a powerful example of what you're trying to partner with organizations to do, which is go in and help them deploy these conditions so that we are trying to minimize the onset of unintended consequences. Talk to us a little bit about AI. I've heard you, AI in healthcare.
Yeah. Look, this is where I think we have the best risk-reward ratio.
Yeah.
And I was banging my head. Why does everybody feel so good about AI in healthcare? Why do I feel good about it? And it's because it has the two things, make it very simple, that every company, every industry should have to start a basis to start response. And you just summed them up. It has an ethical framework. And the ethical framework starts with, guess what? The Hippocratic Oath, right? So when doctors and nurses take that oath, their mindset is, I am here to help people, and that's what I'm going to do, and I'm not going to harm people. That's kind of part of my job, is not to harm people, only help them. So there is that framework, right? And I would argue many people in healthcare have similar, even if they don't take the Hippocratic Oath. But then they have guardrails, right? So they take that oath and they put in guardrails. What are the guardrails? Well, there's HIPAA, data privacy guardrails, that we're not going to abuse this data. There's the FDA, medical device guardrails. And because of these things, I believe that we will see a lot more benefit than harm in healthcare. It's one of the areas you have to be really excited about. Now, is there room for a lot of danger? Yes. Is there already precedent where some people have said, no, that's against our ethics? There actually is. In gene splicing and CRISPR, not necessarily AI, but we called it AI. But there was an incident where, a Chinese scientist, edited a gene for a baby, and the whole community said, no, we're not doing that. We're not doing that. Now, we'll see what happens, because we've all seen the sci-fi movie where we'll see what happens. But the community of scientists working on genes and working on, altering genes, trying to solve, things, says, no, we're not going to do that. Like so anyway, healthcare is a really important thing, but I think you summed it up for everybody, and healthcare is an example for everybody. Every single company should have these two things: ethical framework and a governance plan. And you can't have a governance plan unless you have the ethical framework. So you need to understand, what are your company values? What industry do you operate in? Build an ethical framework. Build your own constitution. Build your own kind of set of rules. And then that will inform, now we can deploy a governance policy. What does that mean, governance policy? It means, how are we going to monitor? How are we going to map, monitor, manage the deployment of AI technology and all the interactions? Now, it sounds overwhelming, but it's not. There are actually companies now that have built the tools that allow you to have a dashboard and to watch all of it. So start with the framework, you build, and there also are now like common practices, like, the NIST framework, and, just like GDPR became a framework for data privacy. So anyway, this is all doable. Every company can do it. And the last thing I'll say on technology, because I know we're going to have to get to what the hope of the future, but the last thing I'll say on all this technology is, we can do all this without losing the innovation race. Okay? We don't have to slow down. I am pro-tech. I still believe that the technology can have more benefits than harm, but I don't believe for a second we're going to lose the AI technology race to China if we prohibit Grok from nudifying images of young children. I don't believe for a second we cut innovation if a news report is being delivered by some AI image that is not a human, and it's stamped that this is kind of an AI-generated news reporter. I mean, these are things we can do. So let's just agree on some simple things we can do. And the last thing is that the companies are so important. The companies out there deploying AI, because in the absence of any U.S. federal regulation, our job at Ethical Tech Project is to find those companies that want to do it right and then to shine a light on them, that they are an example. So in the healthcare industry, we're looking for companies that are the shining example that show everybody, look, we're doing AI right. It's great for our business. You can too. And that's how we're going to make impact. And so that's what I spend my time trying to do. After all the
That's a very empowered frame. And I think it's so important to hear the echo and refrain of this episode, the mitigating against the unintended consequences, because I encourage everybody to go look at the Ethical Tech Project website. And when I was there, I read about the tendency of AI agents to wander away from their stated purposes, and we see some kind of regression to misbehavior. Quote, agents won't stay aligned on their own. They have to be governed. And then we have the problem of, you think that you've licensed these LL models. You think your enterprise is using just the licensed ones. But then there's this phenomenon called shadow AI, where people are using other models that are not sanctioned by your company. So there are so many layers to this. But as you say, if you have the ethical principles and then you build the governance framework, you have created guardrails.
Yes.
Even at Davos, the number one thing they were talking about was trust is the true limit of AI innovation. And I've heard you talk about trust being the ultimate strategic advantage in AI. So let's go to hope. Robert, what gives you hope about the future?
My hope is that, and I believe this, that humans solve it. Now, what does mean by that? I kind of believe at my core that humans were built to solve issues. And my hope is that if things like what I'm doing is trying to educate people and share lessons, that enough people start thinking, talking about it, and, we have a survival instinct. So my hope is we can solve it. We can realize that, we have to use this in a good way. But part of that hope is that we realize, and it's a challenging moment in history, that we're all connected more than ever. See, what the internet did and what the phone did is you can be anywhere in the world and you could be connected and having a video chat. Well, AI now is going to take that connectivity and amplify good and bad. So I know we're living in a world where we're in some ways, like the United States is disconnecting a little from the world as being engaged, involved in international organizations. And there are issues with some international organizations. Okay, I get it. But the core hope is that we realize we're actually more connected than ever, and that kind of being tribal or nationalistic and trying to create tariffs and shut things out, I don't think that's going to solve this issue. We need to, and I know it sounds crazy, we need to all say, look, we want to survive and we want to be human. We don't want to live in a world where we built robots that are completely autonomous because we can. We want to live in a world where we've got unbelievable technology and it's working in service of humanity. So my hope is we realize we're connected, we can do this, it's worthwhile. It's not that much effort to ensure this benefit for our children and our children's children. And we kind of need to zoom out from this moment, zoom out and say, well, where do we want to be in 10 years, 25 years, 50 years? And what do we need to do now to make sure that we get there? And, what are the lessons learned? There are a lot of lessons from the internet. And I actually believe that people will get there. You're already seeing it. I mean, you're seeing some backlash. Right? But you got to channel that. And I think, these big frontier model companies, I think they're in a tough spot because they know they're messing with something really powerful and they don't even know how to do it. So hopefully they will see the groundswell and people will then at those companies figure out how to do this and then collaborate with each other in a meaningful way. But that's my hope. My hope is we can see all the beauty of it, in healthcare, in manufacturing. My hope is it's deflationary, not inflationary, right? Because we can create goods and services cheaper, better, faster. So my hope is we can get all the benefits and somehow mitigate the harm, and that we'll come to realize that this is important work to do right now. And you're hosting this podcast is helping that work. Hopefully a lot of people listen to this, be inspired by it, think about it. I'd love to engage with anybody and everybody elevating this conversation. And it's not just rhetoric. It's good business. It's good for humanity. It's good for our children.
Robert Levitan of the Ethical Tech Project. And yeah, you're really pointing to, and your writings echo this, it's an opportunity for us as humans to exercise agency. We have this tool with power that we've never seen in our lifetime because it's sitting on the connected world, because we're just beginning to dance with it. And so we have this opportunity where we can come together and use it for good and mitigate harm. And the question is, what will we all do? We've adopted this tool as consumers, but are we using our voices to argue for sensible governance and the adoption of ethical principles? So use your wallet, use your vote, use your voice, look up the Ethical Tech Project. I want to thank you so much. I think that you are such a remarkable person who has such an open curiosity and not only a techno-optimism, but an internal ingrained optimism in how you view the world and how you view opportunities. And that's enabled you to take these nascent technologies and figure out how to use them for good, for societal progress, and in favor of innovation. And you've had a remarkable career, and I love that you are now working on ethical tech because it is possible and we need it. And we are capable of great things. I also want to thank you on a very personal level. One of the most meaningful things in my undergraduate experience, we both had the good fortune of attending the marvelous Duke University. And Robert was slightly ahead of me, and he was formative along with Walter Dean, Sandy Rogers, and Paul Dewey, and many, many others. But Robert probably was the pathfinder of creating Cable 13, which was a student-run organization. And I spent absolutely 100% of my free time working on Cable 13. It was the greatest experience. It really helped me grow. It helped me learn how to use my voice. It helped me learn how to engage others. And had you not been the pathfinder and created Cable 13, I would never have had the experience that I had as an undergraduate that has helped me through my entire life. So very, very personally, I want to thank you, Robert.
You are welcome. And for those who don't know, Cable 13 was a cable television channel run by Duke students. Yeah, it was really, really fun. I didn't create it, but I feel like I elevated it greatly. It was a big deal at Duke, and it was so much fun. And, we look back, we take for granted those days. They were great days, and we don't know what impact it has, but thank you for sharing that it had some impact on you.
Thank you. Yeah, you had Late Night with Lev, and I had Talks with Terry. If only we had the Betamax. So thank you so much, Robert, and thank you to the Ethical Tech Project. And you are showing the way forward. We can use ethics. We can use governance sensibly and still be very pro-innovation and use the massive power of AI to solve our intractable problems like climate change and fighting disease. So let's come together and use AI for good. Thank you, Robert.
Thank you. My pleasure to be here.